Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Harvey Stewart had built his life like he built his bridges, methodically, with precision, and designed to last. At 42, he commanded respect in the construction industry, not just for his engineering brilliance, but for his reputation as a man who never broke his word. His dark eyes held an intensity that made contractors nervous and clients confident. When Harvey Stewart shook your hand on a deal, it was better than any contract. 15 years ago, he'd married Jennifer Miller, the radiant daughter of construction mogul John Miller. Jennifer, with her golden hair and charming smile, had been the prize every man in their social circle coveted. Harvey had won her heart with his ambition and unwavering loyalty, qualities that her father, John, had immediately recognized and respected. John Miller had built Miller Construction from nothing into a regional powerhouse. At 68, with silver hair and weathered hands, he was finally ready to step down. Harvey had worked tirelessly for the past decade, transforming from son-in-law to indispensable partner. The company's most profitable contracts bore Harvey's signature. His innovative designs had won industry awards, and his project management had earned Miller Construction a reputation for delivering impossible builds on schedule. The Stewarts lived in a sprawling colonial in Westchester County, complete with a perfectly manicured lawn that Jennifer fussed over every weekend. Their two children, 15-year-old Michael and 13-year-old Sarah, attended private school and wanted for nothing. From the outside, Harvey Stewart had achieved the American dream. But Harvey had always been observant. Little things had started nagging at him over the past year. Jennifer's late nights shopping with friends, her newfound interest in fitness that required expensive personal training sessions, and her sudden criticism of his workaholic tendencies. She'd grown distant, answering his questions with rehearsed responses and avoiding his touch with practiced excuses. Then there was Kelvin Hart. Kelvin had joined Miller Construction 8 months ago as the new business development director. A smooth talker with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive wardrobe that screamed new money. John had hired him despite Harvey's reservations, claiming they needed fresh blood to expand into new markets. Kelvin was younger, flashier, and had an MBA from Wharton that he mentioned in every conversation. Harvey had noticed how Jennifer's demeanor changed whenever Kelvin was around, how she laughed too loudly at his jokes during company events, how she'd started wearing perfume to casual family barbecues when Kelvin attended, how she developed opinions about business strategies she'd never cared about before. The signs were there, subtle but unmistakable to a man who built his career on paying attention to details others missed. Harvey had said nothing, waiting and watching, because Harvey Stewart was not a man who acted on suspicion. He acted on certainty. 3 weeks ago, Harvey had hired a private investigator, not some sleazy divorce specialist, but Roland Bruce, a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate intelligence. Roland's report sat locked in Harvey's office safe. 43 pages of documented proof that his wife of 15 years was having an affair with Kelvin Hart. Hotel receipts, photographs, credit card statements showing expensive gifts Harvey had never seen Jennifer wear at home. But the betrayal went deeper than adultery. According to Roland's investigation, Jennifer and Kelvin had been planning for months. John Miller's retirement party wasn't just a celebration, it was an ambush. The board meeting scheduled for the morning after the party would vote on Harvey's removal from the company. Kelvin would slide into Harvey's position. Jennifer would get a profitable divorce settlement, and Harvey would be left with nothing but the shame of his professional and personal failure. They'd underestimated him completely. Harvey closed the investigator's report and placed it back in his safe. Tomorrow night, at John Miller's retirement party, Jennifer would smile and tell him to grab the champagne. He would find that termination letter exactly as they planned. But what Jennifer and Kelvin didn't know was that Harvey Stewart had spent the last 3 weeks preparing his own surprise. He'd liquidated personal investments they didn't know about, moved assets Jennifer couldn't track, and made phone calls to people who owed him favors spanning 15 years in the industry. Harvey had built his reputation on loyalty and keeping his word, but he'd also built it on never forgetting a betrayal. As he sat in his study that evening, watching Jennifer read bedtime stories to Sarah through the window, Harvey felt no sadness. The time for sentiment had passed the moment she chose to conspire against him instead of simply asking for a divorce. Jennifer had declared war by involving his career, his reputation, and his relationship with John Miller. Harvey Stewart had never lost a war. Chapter 2. The Revelation. The Miller estate buzzed with celebration. 200 guests filled the grand ballroom, toasting John Miller's remarkable 40-year career. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over men in expensive suits and women draped in designer gowns. The who's who of the construction industry had gathered to honor a legend, and Harvey played his part perfectly, the devoted son-in-law, proud of his mentor's legacy. Jennifer looked stunning in her emerald dress, the one she'd claimed was for special occasions. Harvey now knew she'd worn it to her hotel meetings with Kelvin. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting compliments on her father's success while playing the role of supportive wife. Kelvin Hart worked the room like a predator marking territory. He'd positioned himself near the board members, laughing at their jokes and presenting himself as the future of Miller Construction. Harvey watched him with detached curiosity, noting how Kelvin's confidence had grown over the past month. The man actually believed he'd outmaneuvered Harvey Stewart. John Miller approached the podium for his speech, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades in business. "Building isn't just about concrete and steel," he said, his eyes finding Harvey in the crowd. "It's about trust, loyalty, and legacy. I'm proud to pass this company to people who understand those values." The irony wasn't lost on Harvey. John genuinely believed he was protecting the company by removing his son-in-law. Jennifer had poisoned her father's mind with carefully crafted stories about Harvey's declining performance and concerning judgment calls. Kelvin had provided the business case, presenting a restructuring plan that painted Harvey as a liability rather than an asset. As the applause died down, Jennifer appeared at Harvey's side, her smile radiant for the cameras. "Honey," she said, her voice honey-sweet with false affection, "would you grab a champagne from the coat check? Father wants to make a private toast with the family." Harvey nodded, playing his part one final time. "Of course, darling." The coat check area was dimly lit and empty. Harvey found the box Jennifer had described, wrapped in gold paper with an elegant bow. His hands were steady as he opened it, though his heart rate didn't change when he saw the contents. The termination letter was typed on Miller Construction letterhead, signed by all 7 board members. His final paycheck lay beneath it, along with a sticky note in Jennifer's handwriting. The board voted. "You're fired." For a moment, Harvey simply stared at the note. Not at the words, but at Jennifer's handwriting, the same script that had written "I love you" in birthday cards for 15 years. The same hand that had signed Christmas cards to the Stewart family every year. The same hand that had written their wedding vows. Harvey folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. Then he pulled out his phone and made the call he'd been planning for 3 weeks. "Bruce, it's Harvey Stewart. Execute Phase 1. When he returned to the ballroom, the family had gathered in John Miller's private study. Jennifer stood beside her father, radiant with victory. Kelvin lingered near the bookshelf, trying to look casual while clearly savoring the moment. John held a bottle of Dom Perignon, waiting for Harvey's return. "There's my boy," John said warmly. "One last toast between family before I officially step down." Harvey smiled, accepting the crystal flute. "To family," he said, raising his glass, "and to getting exactly what we deserve." They drank, and Harvey watched Jennifer's eyes. She was practically glowing with triumph, probably imagining the life she'd build with Kelvin, using Harvey's destroyed reputation as their foundation. Neither she nor Kelvin noticed that Harvey's phone was buzzing constantly in his pocket. "Well," Harvey said, setting down his empty glass, "I should let you all enjoy the rest of the evening. I have some calls to make." He kissed Jennifer's cheek. She actually leaned into it, still playing the loving wife, even in her moment of victory, and shook John's hand. "Thank you for everything, John. You've taught me more than you know." As Harvey walked toward the exit, he felt his phone vibrating again. By morning, 37 missed calls from Bruce Andrews, Miller Construction's corporate lawyer, would be waiting. But tonight, Harvey Stewart was driving home to set Phase 2 in motion. Jennifer and Kelvin had won the battle, but they'd made a critical error. They thought Harvey Stewart was just another casualty of corporate politics. They were about to learn that Harvey Stewart was a man who built bridges, and a man who knew exactly how to burn them down. Chapter 3. The Architect's Plan. Harvey's home office had been transformed into a war room. 3 laptops hummed quietly on his desk, displaying financial reports, legal documents, and construction project timelines. The investigator's report lay open beside a yellow legal pad filled with Harvey's meticulous handwriting. He'd been working since 4 a.m., and by dawn, the foundation of his counterattack was complete. The first call came at 6:23 a.m. Bruce Andrews, Miller Construction's corporate lawyer, sounded panicked. "Harvey, where the hell are you? We need to talk." The Riverside Municipal Project, Jesus Christ, Harvey, the entire contract is structured around your personal engineering license. If you're terminated, we're in breach of a $40 million project. The city can sue us for 3 times that amount. Harvey let the call go to voicemail. Then the next one, and the next. By 7 a.m., his phone showed 13 missed calls from Bruce, 11 from John Miller, and surprisingly, 7 from Kelvin Hart. Jennifer had called twice, her voice progressing from confused to furious. At exactly 8 a.m., Harvey answered his phone. "Harvey Stewart." "Harvey, thank God. This is Bruce. We have a situation. That termination letter. There are complications we didn't anticipate. Several major contracts are tied to your personal certifications. We need to discuss a transition plan." "I'm afraid that's impossible, Bruce. My termination was effective immediately, according to the board's decision. I'm no longer a Miller Construction employee. But the contracts are Miller Construction's responsibility, not mine. I was just an employee, remember? Good luck with the lawsuits." Harvey ended the call and immediately placed another one. "Eugene, it's Harvey Stewart." "Yes, I know it's early. I'm ready to discuss your offer." Eugene Bender was Harvey's former MIT roommate and current CEO of Bender Engineering, one of the largest construction firms on the East Coast. For 2 years, Eugene had been trying to poach Harvey from Miller Construction with increasingly generous offers. Harvey had always declined out of loyalty to John Miller. Loyalty was no longer a factor. The conversation lasted 47 minutes. When it ended, Harvey Stewart was the new chief engineering officer of Bender Engineering, with a salary 30% higher than his Miller Construction pay, equity in the company, and a signing bonus that made the termination payout look like pocket change. More importantly, his new contract included a non-compete clause that prevented him from working on any projects that might compete with Bender Engineering. Every major project in Miller Construction's pipeline would now face a conflict of interest challenge if they tried to replace Harvey with another firm that employed him. Harvey's phone rang again. John Miller this time. "Harvey, son, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, John. I received my termination letter last night. It was quite clear. The board made that decision based on some concerns about." "The board made that decision based on bad information," Harvey interrupted. "Information provided by people who don't understand the complexity of our current contracts. But that's not my problem anymore. Harvey, please. Whatever Jennifer told you about last night." "Jennifer told me to grab the champagne. I did. Everything else I learned from the termination letter you signed." There was a long pause. "The Riverside project is a Miller Construction project. I'm sure Kelvin Hart has it well in hand. He did present himself as my replacement, didn't he?" After ending the call, Harvey walked to his safe and removed a manila folder he'd prepared 3 weeks ago. Inside were copies of every contract, every project detail, and every engineering specification that made Harvey Stewart irreplaceable. Not the originals. Those belonged to Miller Construction. But Harvey's memory, his personal notes, and his understanding of structural requirements couldn't be terminated with a letter. His phone rang again. "Jennifer. Harvey, where are you? I woke up and you were gone." "Your car is in the shop," Harvey lied smoothly. "I took a cab to the office to clean out my desk." "About last night? What about it?" "Your father's retirement party was lovely. Very memorable. Harvey, I know you're upset about the company restructuring, but I'm not upset, Jennifer. I'm making new plans. We should talk when I get home. But Harvey had no intention of going home. Not yet. He had 3 more calls to make, and then a meeting with his new employer. By the time Jennifer realized the scope of what her betrayal had cost, Harvey Stewart would be 30 miles away, designing the destruction of everything she thought she'd won. The last call was to Roland Bruce, his investigator. Roland? It's Harvey. I need you to expand the surveillance. I want to know every move they make, every conversation they have, and every person they contact. And Roland? Start Phase 3. Phase 3 was Harvey's favorite part of the plan. While Jennifer and Kelvin celebrated their corporate coup, they were about to discover that Harvey Stewart was not just an engineer. He was an architect, and he'd been designing their downfall for 3 weeks. They thought they'd fired Harvey Stewart. What they'd actually done was unleash him. Chapter 4. The Foundation Cracks. The Bender Engineering offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Hartford, 40 miles from the Miller Construction headquarters. Harvey's new corner office overlooked the Connecticut River, and from his window, he could see construction sites where his designs were reshaping the skyline. Eugene Bender had welcomed him like a conquering hero, and by noon, Harvey was already reviewing project proposals that would make Miller Construction's pipeline look modest. His former phone continued buzzing with calls he didn't answer. Instead, Harvey focused on his new responsibilities while Roland Bruce fed him real-time intelligence about the chaos erupting at his former workplace. Jennifer had arrived at Miller Construction at 10 a.m., expecting to find Harvey clearing out his office in defeat. Instead, she found pandemonium. Bruce Andrews was shouting into 3 phones simultaneously. John Miller was locked in emergency meetings with the board, and Kelvin Hart was frantically reviewing contracts he'd never properly understood. The Riverside Municipal Project was the immediate crisis. The city had invested $40 million in Harvey's innovative bridge design, which required his personal engineering seal and ongoing supervision. Miller Construction's termination of Harvey triggered a breach of contract clause that exposed them to liquidated damages exceeding $100 million. But Riverside was just the beginning. Harvey had spent 15 years building relationships with municipal planners, state transportation departments, and federal project managers. His reputation had opened doors that Miller Construction couldn't have accessed otherwise. The company's most prestigious contracts, the Metro-North Railway expansion, the Harbor Restoration Project, the new courthouse complex, all contained provisions that made Harvey's involvement essential. Kelvin Hart was discovering that business development meant more than PowerPoint presentations and networking lunches. The technical specifications Harvey had developed couldn't be replicated by reading his files. The relationships Harvey had cultivated couldn't be transferred with a handshake. The innovation that had made Miller Construction a premier firm was walking out the door in a custom-tailored suit. At 2 p.m., Harvey's assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Stewart? There's a Jennifer Stewart here to see you. She says she's your wife." Harvey looked up from the structural plans he was reviewing for a casino project in Atlantic City, a project Miller Construction had bid on but lost to Bender Engineering 6 months ago. "Send her in." Jennifer entered like a woman walking into battle. Her designer suit was armor, her smile was a weapon, and her eyes held the cold calculation Harvey had failed to see for too many years. She was beautiful, brilliant, and absolutely furious. "Hello, darling," she said, closing the door behind her. "Lovely new office. Very impressive. Thank you." Eugene spared no expense. "Eugene Bender, your new employer." Jennifer moved to the window, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Funny how quickly you found a new position. Almost like you were planning this." Harvey leaned back in his leather chair, studying his wife with the same attention he gave structural blueprints. "Planning what? Finding work after being terminated? I'd call that basic financial responsibility. Don't play games with me, Harvey. The Riverside project is falling apart. 3 other contracts are in jeopardy. Daddy's company is facing lawsuits that could destroy 40 years of work. And what does that have to do with me? I was terminated yesterday, remember? Miller Construction made it clear that my services were no longer needed." Jennifer's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. You're sabotaging the company out of spite. I'm protecting my professional reputation. Every contract I signed was based on my personal guarantee of engineering excellence. If Miller Construction no longer wants my involvement, they can't use my reputation to secure their projects. The board is willing to reconsider the termination. Daddy wants to offer you a partnership, full restoration of your position, even a raise. How generous, Harvey interrupted. And what changed their minds? Yesterday, I was a liability who needed immediate removal. Today, I'm partnership material. Jennifer's composure cracked further. Harvey, please. Whatever you think you know. I know that Kelvin Hart presented a business case for my removal 3 weeks ago. I know that you supported that recommendation. I know that you orchestrated last night's humiliation because you thought it would be dramatic and decisive. Jennifer stared at him, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. How could you possibly know about your affair? Harvey's voice remained conversational, but his eyes held the cold precision that made contractors nervous. Jennifer, I've known for months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the late nights, the new clothes, the way you light up whenever Kelvin enters a room? The silence stretched between them like a suspension cable under tension. Jennifer's breathing was shallow, her hands clenched at her sides. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Because I needed to understand the scope of the betrayal. An affair is personal. Destroying my career was business. The moment you made it business, you declared war. Harvey stood and walked to his window, looking out at the construction sites below. I built Miller Construction's reputation. I designed the projects that made your father proud. I created the innovations that separated his company from every competitor. And you threw all of that away for what? Better sex? A younger man? The thrill of betrayal? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Harvey turned to face her, and Jennifer stepped backward involuntarily. The man looking at her wasn't the devoted husband who'd brought her coffee every morning for 15 years. This was Harvey Stewart, the engineer, calculating load-bearing capacities and stress points with mathematical precision. You wanted me destroyed, Jennifer. You're about to learn what that actually looks like. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face went white. What is it? Harvey asked, though he already knew. Roland Bruce was very punctual. It's Kelvin. He says there's been a problem with the Metro North project. Some kind of inspection issue. Harvey smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Phase 4 just started. Chapter 5, Structural Failure. Kelvin Hart's office at Miller Construction looked like a hurricane had blown through it. Legal documents covered his desk. His laptop displayed 17 different crisis management emails, and his trash can overflowed with crumpled pages of calculations he couldn't make work. The man who'd been so confident 48 hours ago now looked like he hadn't slept since Jennifer's revelation about Harvey's knowledge. The Metro North Railway expansion had hit its first major snag at 3:47 p.m. State transportation inspectors had arrived unannounced to review Harvey's innovative rail junction design. The problem wasn't with the engineering. Harvey's work was flawless. The problem was that Kelvin Hart couldn't explain it. The lead inspector, Miguel Fritz, was a 20-year veteran who'd worked with Harvey on 6 previous projects. He knew Harvey's methodology, trusted his calculations, and expected to discuss technical specifications with the project's chief engineer. Instead, he found Kelvin fumbling through files and making excuses about Harvey's sudden departure. Where is Harvey Stewart? Miguel had asked. Mr. Stewart is no longer with the company, Kelvin replied, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Since when? Since yesterday. Miguel Fritz had stared at Kelvin for a long moment, then made a phone call. 30 minutes later, the entire Metro North project was placed under regulatory review, pending verification of the engineering specifications by the original designer. Harvey learned about this development from his new office, where he was enjoying a cup of coffee and designing a more efficient rail junction for a competing bid. Eugene Bender had been delighted to learn that Miller Construction's Metro North project was in jeopardy. Bender Engineering had submitted the original low bid for that contract, but lost to Miller Construction's innovative design. Harvey's innovative design. His phone rang at 4:15 p.m. John Miller. Harvey, please. Miguel Fritz says the Metro North project can't proceed without your direct involvement. The state won't accept Kelvin's oversight. That's unfortunate, Harvey said, not looking up from his blueprints. But I'm sure Miller Construction can find another qualified engineer. You know, there isn't another engineer in the region who understands that rail junction design. You created something completely new. I did, and I own the intellectual property for that innovation. It's part of my personal engineering portfolio, not Miller Construction's assets. The silence on the other end was deafening. Harvey could practically hear John Miller's world collapsing. Harvey, son, what do you want? Name your price. Partnership, equity, complete project control. I want you to honor the termination letter your board signed. I want Miller Construction to live with the consequences of their decision. And I want Jennifer to explain to you exactly why I'll never work for your company again. Harvey ended the call and immediately placed another one. Roland? How's our friend Kelvin handling the pressure? Not well, Roland's gravelly voice replied. He's made 7 calls to headhunters in the past 2 hours. Looks like he's planning an exit strategy. Excellent. And Jennifer just left her father's office. She looked like she'd been crying. Should I continue surveillance? Absolutely. I want to know where she goes, who she sees, and what she does, especially if she meets with Kelvin. Harvey had anticipated this moment. Jennifer and Kelvin had built their relationship on shared ambition and mutual betrayal. When that ambition crumbled, the relationship would follow. People who could betray a spouse, an employer wouldn't hesitate to betray each other when the stakes got high enough. At 6 p.m., Harvey's prediction proved accurate. Roland sent a text. Subjects meeting at the Meridian Hotel, room 1247. Same room they've used for 3 months. Harvey left his office and drove through Hartford's evening traffic, not toward the hotel, but toward the suburbs where his children waited for dinner. Michael and Sarah deserved to hear about their parents' divorce from their father, not from gossip or legal papers. They were innocents in this war, and Harvey intended to protect them from the worst of what was coming. But first, he had a stop to make. The Meridian Hotel's lobby was elegant and discreet, exactly the kind of place where successful professionals conducted private business. Harvey walked through it like he belonged there, nodding to the concierge and taking the elevator to the 12th floor. He didn't go to room 1247. He went to room 1249, which Roland had reserved under a false name 3 hours earlier. The adjoining rooms shared a thin wall, and Roland's surveillance equipment could pick up conversations clearly. Harvey put on headphones and listened to his wife and her lover discuss their crumbling plans. Can't handle the technical aspects, Jennifer was saying. Daddy's furious. The board is talking about emergency restructuring. I never said I could replace Harvey's engineering expertise, Kelvin replied. I said I could handle the business development side while we found technical contractors. We don't have time for contractors. We have deadlines, penalties, lawsuits. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to destroy your husband's career for fun. There was a sharp crack, the sound of Jennifer slapping Kelvin across the face. Don't you dare blame this on me. You wanted Harvey gone as much as I did. You said he was holding the company back from modern business practices. I said the company needed fresh leadership. I didn't say we should fire the one man who makes our projects work. Harvey smiled in the darkness. The foundation was cracking exactly as he designed it. So what do we do now? Jennifer asked. We salvage what we can. I'll take a position with another firm. You'll divorce Harvey quietly, and we'll rebuild somewhere else. And my father's company will survive or it won't. That's not our problem anymore. There it was. The moment Harvey had been waiting for. Jennifer and Kelvin weren't just betraying him. They were abandoning John Miller too. The old man who'd welcomed Kelvin like a son and trusted his daughter's judgment was about to discover that loyalty meant nothing to the people he'd tried to help. Harvey removed the headphones and left the hotel. He had one more call to make, and then he would go home to have dinner with his children. Tomorrow, Phase 5 would begin, and Jennifer would learn that Harvey Stewart hadn't just been building a career for 15 years. He'd been building an empire. Chapter 6, The Weight of Truth. Harvey found his children in the family room, sprawled across the sectional sofa with homework spread between them. Michael was hunched over trigonometry problems, while Sarah worked on a science project about bridge construction, a coincidence that would have made Harvey smile under different circumstances. "Dad," Sarah looked up, her face brightening. "I'm doing my project on suspension bridges. Want to help? Maybe later, sweetheart. Right now, I need to talk to both of you about something important." Michael closed his math book, immediately sensing the gravity in his father's tone. At 15, he'd inherited Harvey's analytical mind and Jennifer's social instincts. Sarah, at 13, was more artistic but equally perceptive. Harvey sat across from them, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother and I are going to get divorced." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's pencil slipped from her fingers. Michael's face went pale. "Is it because of your job?" Michael asked quietly. "Mom said you got fired yesterday." "The job situation is complicated, but no. Your mother and I have been having problems for a while. We've grown apart, and we want different things now." Harvey wouldn't tell them about the affair. Not yet, maybe never. Children shouldn't carry the weight of their parents' betrayals. But they deserve to understand that their world was changing. "Where will we live?" Sarah's voice was small, scared. "That's still being decided. But no matter what happens, both of your parents love you completely. This divorce is about problems between your mother and me, not about either of you." Michael leaned forward, his expression serious beyond his years. "Dad, are you okay? You look different." Harvey studied his son's face, seeing Jennifer's features combined with his own determination. "I'm handling a lot of changes right now, but I want you both to know that I'll always take care of you. Always." They talked for another hour, Harvey answering their questions as honestly as possible without revealing the scope of the war brewing around them. When Jennifer arrived home at 8:30 p.m., she found Harvey helping Sarah with her bridge project while Michael worked nearby. "Harvey," Jennifer's voice was careful, controlled. "Could I speak with you privately?" They moved to Harvey's study, where the investigator's report still lay in his open safe. Jennifer noticed it immediately. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. 3 weeks. Since I confirmed what I'd suspected for months." Jennifer sank into the chair across from his desk, suddenly looking older than her 38 years. "The children know we're getting divorced. They don't know why, and they won't unless you make it necessary. Harvey, please. Maybe we can work this out. Counseling, therapy. You conspired with your lover to destroy my career at your father's retirement party. You wanted me humiliated publicly, professionally ruined, and emotionally devastated. There's nothing to work out." Jennifer's composure finally cracked completely. Tears ran down her cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "I never meant for it to go this far. Kelvin said it would be quick, clean, that you'd land on your feet. Kelvin Hart is a coward who's already planning to abandon you and your father's company. He told you exactly what you wanted to hear because he wanted exactly what you were offering. That's not true. It's exactly true. And, Jennifer, it gets worse." Harvey opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. The display showed surveillance photos from Meridian Hotel, time-stamped just hours earlier. Jennifer and Kelvin in heated argument, her hand frozen mid-slap across his face. "He's already starting to blame you for the company's problems. By next week, he'll be interviewing for positions at other firms. By next month, he'll be telling people that the affair was your idea, that you seduced him away from his professional judgment." Jennifer stared at the photos, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally, understanding. "You've been watching us. I've been protecting myself. Everything I've done has been in response to your actions. You declared war, Jennifer. I'm simply better at fighting it. What do you want from me?" Harvey closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "I want you to understand what you've lost. Tomorrow, Miller Construction will face its second major contract review. By Friday, your father will be looking at lawsuit exposure that could bankrupt the company. Next week, every major project in their pipeline will be in jeopardy. And you could stop all of that. I could, but I won't. Even if it destroys my father? He never hurt you, Harvey. He loved you like a son. John Miller signed my termination letter based on lies you, and Kelvin fed him. He chose to trust his daughter and her lover over 15 years of loyalty and results. That was his choice." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, processing the scope of the destruction Harvey had unleashed. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. What about us? What about our family? We haven't been a family for months. We've been strangers living in the same house, playing roles for the children's benefit. The only difference now is that I'm not pretending anymore. Harvey stood and walked to his safe, removing a manila envelope he'd prepared that morning. Divorce papers. I'm keeping the house, my personal investments, and primary custody of the children. You'll receive spousal support for 5 years, enough to maintain a reasonable lifestyle while you rebuild your career. Primary custody? Jennifer's voice sharpened. You can't just take my children. I can and I will. The investigators' report documents your affair in detail. Your conspiracy to destroy my career shows calculated dishonesty. No family court judge will award primary custody to a mother who prioritized her lover over her family's stability. Jennifer took the envelope with shaking hands. Harvey, please. Don't do this. Don't destroy everything out of anger. Harvey walked to the door of his study, then paused and looked back at his wife of 15 years. I'm not destroying anything, Jennifer. I'm just letting you live with the consequences of what you built. As Jennifer sat alone in the study, Harvey returned to the family room to help Sarah finish her bridge project. Tomorrow would bring new crises, fresh revelations, and the next phase of his carefully constructed revenge. But tonight, he would be the father his children needed while their world fell apart around them. The foundation Jennifer and Kelvin had tried to destroy was proving stronger than they'd imagined. The structure they'd built their betrayal on was about to collapse completely. Chapter 7. The Collapse. The Miller Construction Emergency Board meeting convened at 7 a.m. on Friday morning, 3 days after John Miller's retirement party. The conference room that had hosted celebratory toasts just 72 hours earlier now felt like a funeral parlor. 7 board members sat around the mahogany table, their faces grim as Bruce Andrews delivered the legal assessment. Gentlemen, we're looking at potential liability exceeding $200 million. The Riverside Municipal Project alone carries liquidated damages of $112 million. Metro North is under regulatory review, which could trigger federal penalties. The Harbor Restoration Project is on hold pending engineering verification. John Miller sat at the head of the table, his retirement celebration photos still displayed on the credenza behind him. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. How did this happen? Asked Carlton Glenn, the company's chief financial officer. Harvey Stewart was supposed to be a liability. Kelvin Hart assured us that replacing him would improve efficiency. All eyes turned to Kelvin, who sat at the far end of the table looking like a man facing execution. His confident demeanor had evaporated completely, replaced by nervous sweat and darting glances toward the door. The business case was sound, Kelvin said weakly. No one anticipated that Harvey would react this way. React this way? John Miller's voice carried a dangerous edge. Son, Harvey didn't react. He planned. Every contract he signed included personal guarantees that made him irreplaceable. Every project he designed required his ongoing involvement. He built safeguards that protected the company and protected himself. But the restructuring plan was written by someone who didn't understand our business. John interrupted. Someone who thought construction was like any other industry where you could replace expertise with enthusiasm. Bruce Andrews cleared his throat. There's more. Harvey Stewart filed a defamation lawsuit yesterday afternoon. He's claiming that his termination was based on false information designed to damage his professional reputation. That's impossible, Kelvin said quickly. What false information? According to the lawsuit, you told the board that Harvey had made questionable judgment calls and shown declining performance. Harvey's filing includes performance reviews, client testimonials, and project success metrics that contradict every claim in your restructuring proposal. The room fell silent except for the humming of the air conditioning. Carlton Glenn was the first to speak. Kelvin, did you fabricate evidence against Harvey Stewart? I didn't fabricate anything. I presented concerns about leadership style, resistance to modern business practices. Show me documentation, John Miller said coldly. Show me one performance review, one client complaint, One project failure that supports your recommendation. Kelvin's face went white. It wasn't about documentation. It was about vision, about moving the company forward. It was about removing Harvey so you could take his position, Carlton said. And you convinced us to commit corporate suicide to make it happen. John Miller stood slowly, his hands flat on the conference table. Kelvin, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't do this. I have a contract. Your contract has a clause about material misrepresentation. You lied to this board about Harvey Stewart to advance your own career. That constitutes fraud. As security led Kelvin from the building, John Miller turned to Bruce Andrews. Can we fix this? Can we bring Harvey back? I've been trying to reach him all week. He won't take calls from anyone associated with Miller Construction. His attorney says he's only interested in discussing his defamation lawsuit. What would it take to settle that lawsuit? Public vindication, financial compensation, and a formal apology from the board for accepting false information about his performance. Done. What else? Bruce Andrews looked uncomfortable. John, Harvey doesn't want to come back. Bender Engineering announced his hiring yesterday. Full partnership, equity stake, and control over their East Coast expansion. He's not just employed. He's positioned to become our primary competitor. The reality of the situation settled over the room like concrete hardening. Harvey Stewart wasn't just leaving Miller Construction. He was joining their biggest rival with complete knowledge of their operations, their clients, and their vulnerabilities. There's something else, Bruce added quietly. Jennifer called this morning. She wanted to discuss the divorce settlement Harvey proposed. She seems to think the company might be able to influence his decisions. John Miller's face went ashen. What divorce settlement? Your daughter didn't tell you? Harvey filed for divorce on Wednesday. He's seeking primary custody of the children and alleging adultery as grounds. The silence that followed was broken only by Carlton Glenn's sharp intake of breath. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Jennifer was having an affair. With Kelvin Hart, Bruce confirmed. Harvey's been building a case for months. He has documentation, surveillance, everything he needs to prove infidelity and conspiracy. John Miller sank back into his chair, his face gray. My own daughter conspired against Harvey? According to Harvey's attorney, Jennifer actively participated in planning his termination. She knew about Kelvin's false claims and supported them. The room erupted in angry voices, board members demanding explanations and assigning blame. But John Miller sat in silence, staring at the retirement photos that now seemed to mock him. His celebration had been built on a foundation of lies, and the son-in-law he'd trusted like his own blood had been betrayed by his own daughter. At exactly 9 a.m., as the board meeting descended into chaos, Harvey Stewart was 50 miles away in his new office, reviewing architectural plans for a casino complex in Atlantic City. His secretary had delivered 17 messages from Miller Construction personnel, all of which he'd ignored. Instead, Harvey was focused on the future. Bender Engineering had just won 3 major contracts previously held by Miller Construction competitors. By leveraging Harvey's reputation and relationships, Eugene Bender was positioning his firm to dominate the regional market. Harvey's phone buzzed with a text from Roland Bruce. Kelvin Hart terminated. Jennifer meeting with divorce attorney at 10 a.m. John Miller requesting emergency meeting with you. Harvey typed back, no meetings. Continue surveillance. Prepare Phase 6. Phase 6 was the final component of Harvey's plan, and it would ensure that Jennifer and Kelvin's betrayal had permanent consequences. They thought they were playing a simple game of corporate politics and marital infidelity. They were about to learn that Harvey Stewart played a much longer, more complex game. A game that he always won. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Jennifer sat in her car outside the law offices of Mitchell Conley, trying to summon the courage to walk inside. The divorce attorney Harvey had recommended was supposedly fair but thorough, which, coming from Harvey, probably meant he would dissect her life with surgical precision. Her phone buzzed with another call from her father. She'd been avoiding him since Wednesday night, unable to face the disappointment and anger in his voice. The empire John Miller had spent 40 years building was crumbling because his daughter had chosen passion over loyalty. Inside the law office, Mitchell calmly reviewed Harvey's proposal with professional detachment. At 62, he'd handled hundreds of divorce cases, but this one was particularly complex. Mrs. Stewart, your husband's settlement offer is comprehensive. He's documented extensive evidence of adultery, and his filings suggest premeditation in the destruction of his career. Premeditation, the timing of your affair correlating with business decisions affecting his employment. The coordinated effort to remove him from Miller Construction while you were involved with his replacement. It creates a pattern that suggests calculated betrayal rather than spontaneous infidelity. Jennifer stared at the legal documents spread across the conference table. What does that mean for me? It means your husband has built a case that portrays you not just as an unfaithful spouse, but as someone who actively conspired against your family's financial security. That significantly impacts custody considerations and spousal support calculations. But I'm their mother. You're a mother who prioritized her affair over her children's stability. The evidence shows you were planning to leave their father financially and professionally destroyed. No judge will ignore that when determining what's in the children's best interests. Jennifer's hands shook as she signed document after document, each one a testament to how thoroughly Harvey had outmaneuvered her. The custody arrangement gave her every other weekend and one evening per week. The spousal support would last 5 years and decrease annually. The house, the savings, the investments, everything stayed with Harvey. There is one unusual provision, Mitchell noted. Your husband is requiring that you sign a detailed statement acknowledging your role in his termination from Miller Construction. What kind of statement? A sworn affidavit admitting that you provided false information about his performance to justify his removal. It will be part of his defamation lawsuit against the company. Jennifer read the affidavit with growing horror. Every detail was accurate. Her conversations with Kelvin about Harvey's outdated approaches, her suggestions to her father about modernizing leadership, her active participation in building the case for Harvey's termination. If I sign this, what happens? Your husband drops his demands for additional punitive measures. If you refuse to sign it. Mitchell paused, consulting his notes. He's prepared to seek full custody and eliminate spousal support entirely. Jennifer signed the affidavit. Meanwhile, across town, Kelvin Hart was having his own reckoning. The security guards had escorted him from Miller Construction with nothing but the personal items from his desk. His corporate credit cards were canceled, his company car was repossessed, and his reputation in the industry was toxic. The headhunters he'd contacted earlier in the week were no longer returning his calls. Word had spread quickly through the tight-knit construction community that Kelvin Hart had fabricated evidence against Harvey Stewart, one of the most respected engineers in the region. No reputable firm would risk their credibility by hiring him. His apartment lease was in Jennifer's name, a precaution they'd taken to keep their affair discreet. With Jennifer facing her own financial constraints, Kelvin found himself without income, without prospects, and without allies. At 3 p.m., Kelvin made a desperate decision. He drove to Bender Engineering and requested a meeting with Harvey Stewart. Harvey agreed to see him. The Bender Engineering conference room was stark and modern, nothing like the warm mahogany atmosphere of Miller Construction. Harvey sat across from Kelvin with the same professional courtesy he'd shown to hundreds of contractors over the years. What can I do for you, Kelvin? Harvey, I need you to know that the whole thing got out of hand. I never intended for it to go as far as it did. You mean the affair or the conspiracy to destroy my career? Both. Neither. Look, Jennifer and I. It started as just attraction, but then she began talking about how you were holding the company back, how her father needed fresh leadership. I thought I was helping. Harvey leaned back in his chair, studying Kelvin with the analytical gaze that had made him successful. You thought you were helping by lying about my performance? By fabricating evidence of poor judgment? I thought if you left voluntarily, everyone would benefit. You'd find a better position. The company would modernize. Jennifer would be happier. You thought you'd get my job, my wife, and my life. Everything else was just justification. Kelvin's composure cracked. Please, Harvey. I know I fucked up, but I'm destroyed. No one will hire me. Jennifer won't even take my calls. I'm facing bankruptcy. And what would you like me to do about that? Recommend me. Vouch for my business development skills. Help me find a position somewhere that I can rebuild. Harvey was quiet for a long moment, considering the broken man across from him. When he finally spoke, his voice held no anger, no satisfaction, just cold, mathematical precision. Kelvin, you try to destroy my career, my marriage, and my relationship with my children. You convinced my wife to betray me and my father-in-law to discard me. You built your future on the ruins of my life. I know, and I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want you to understand something about consequences. Every choice has them. Every action creates reactions. You chose to betray me, and now you're living with what that choice created. Harvey stood and walked to the window, overlooking the construction sites below. But you're right about one thing. You are destroyed. Your career is over. Your relationship with Jennifer is finished. Your reputation is permanently damaged. He turned back to face Kelvin. And that's exactly what you deserve. Harvey, please. You can go now. Security will escort you out. As Kelvin was led from the building, Harvey returned to his desk and made one final call. Roland? Phase 7. It's time to close the circle. Phase 7 was Harvey's ultimate gift to himself. The complete and total victory that would ensure neither Jennifer nor Kelvin could ever threaten him again. They destroyed his trust, his marriage, and his relationship with John Miller. Now Harvey Stewart would destroy them completely. Chapter 9. The Last Foundation. 6 months later, Harvey Stewart stood in his new office at Bender Engineering's expanded headquarters, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed his division's unprecedented success. The regional construction industry had experienced a dramatic reshuffling, with Miller Construction losing 60% of its major contracts and Bender Engineering emerging as the dominant firm in the Northeast. John Miller had been forced to sell Miller Construction to a Chicago-based corporation that immediately restructured the company, laying off 40% of the workforce. The proud family business that had taken 40 years to build was now just another subsidiary in a corporate portfolio. Harvey felt no satisfaction in the old man's downfall, but he felt no regret either. John Miller had made his choice when he signed that termination letter. The consequences were simply mathematics, actions and reactions, causes and effects. His children had adapted better than he'd expected. Michael, now 16, spent his weekends working on construction sites, learning the business from the ground up under Harvey's direct supervision. Sarah had thrown herself into her bridge-building projects with renewed passion, already talking about studying engineering like her father. Jennifer had moved to a modest apartment in Hartford, where she worked as a real estate agent for a small firm. The spousal support Harvey provided was sufficient but not generous, enough to maintain dignity, but not enough to fund the lifestyle she'd enjoyed during their marriage. She saw the children according to the court-mandated schedule, but the easy intimacy of their family relationships had been permanently altered. Kelvin Hart had disappeared entirely. Roland Bruce's final surveillance report indicated that he'd left Connecticut for parts unknown, probably using an assumed name to avoid the creditors and former colleagues who wanted answers about his role in Miller Construction's collapse. Some men rebuilt after destroying their lives. Others simply vanished. Kelvin had chosen the latter. Harvey's phone buzzed with a call from Eugene Bender. Harvey, we just landed the Atlantic City Casino project. Congratulations, your design beat out 6 other firms, including some heavy hitters from New York. Thank you, Eugene. I'll have the preliminary specifications ready for review next week. There's something else. The Miller Construction properties are going up for auction next month. The old headquarters building, the equipment yards, even some of the residential developments John Miller started. Interested, Harvey considered the offer. Buying Miller Construction's assets would complete his victory in a poetic way. The company that had fired him would literally become his property. But something about the gesture felt empty. Let me think about it, Harvey said. After ending the call, Harvey walked to his window and looked out at the Hartford skyline. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Jennifer was showing houses to potential buyers, living a life constrained by the choices she'd made. Somewhere beyond that skyline, Kelvin Hart was probably working some dead-end job under a false name, forever looking over his shoulder. They had both learned what Harvey Stewart was capable of when betrayed. The lesson had cost him everything. Harvey's secretary knocked on his door. "Mr. Stewart? There's a call from your daughter's school. Something about a bridge-building competition." Harvey smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. "Put them through." 20 minutes later, he was driving towards Sarah's school to watch her present the suspension bridge model she'd been working on since her parents' divorce. The project had become her way of processing the chaos in her family, and Harvey had helped her refine the engineering principles behind her design. The school auditorium was filled with proud parents watching their children explain complex mechanical concepts with the enthusiasm only 13-year-olds could muster. Sarah's bridge was elegant and functional, incorporating lessons Harvey had taught her about load distribution and stress management. "The key to any strong bridge," Sarah explained to the judges, "is understanding that every part has to work together. If one component fails, the whole structure can collapse. But if you design it right, if you test every connection and plan for every stress point, the bridge can last forever." Harvey watched his daughter with pride, recognizing his own engineering philosophy expressed in her words. But more than that, he saw resilience, the ability to build something beautiful and strong even when the foundation had been shaken. After the presentation, Sarah ran to her father with the first-place ribbon. "Dad, we won. The judges said my bridge was the most innovative design they'd seen in years. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You did incredible work." As they walked to the car, Sarah looked up at her father with the serious expression she'd inherited from both parents. "Dad, do you miss Mom?" Harvey considered the question carefully. "I miss the person I thought she was. But people aren't always who we think they are, and sometimes we have to build new foundations when the old ones prove unreliable. Like bridges. Exactly like bridges." They drove home together, father and daughter, two engineers planning the next phase of their construction project. Behind them, the wreckage of Miller Construction continued to settle into its new reality. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an architectural plan waiting to be built. Harvey Stewart had learned that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. They had to be demolished completely before new construction could begin. He'd torn down the life Jennifer and Kelvin had tried to steal from him. And from those ruins, he'd built something stronger. Something that would last forever. The betrayal that was meant to destroy him had instead freed him to become the architect of his own destiny. And Harvey Stewart, as always, had built his victory to withstand any storm. In the end, he'd given them exactly what they deserved, nothing at all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Rob Hartwell stood at his kitchen window, watching the evening sun cast long shadows across his manicured lawn. At 42, he had built what most would consider the American dream. A sprawling colonial house in Millbrook Heights, a successful construction company, and a family that appeared picture-perfect from the outside. His wife Lisa moved through their home with practiced grace, her auburn hair catching the light as she prepared dinner. Married for 15 years, she had been his anchor after he'd left his previous life behind. Danny, their 13-year-old son, hunched over his homework at the dining table, occasionally glancing up at his father with a mixture of admiration and mild fear that Rob had come to expect. Few people knew about Rob's past. Before Hartwell Construction, before suburban Connecticut, he had been Staff Sergeant Robert Hartwell of the 75th Ranger Regiment. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him patience, precision, and the value of reading people. More importantly, they had taught him that mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford when survival was on the line. The transition to civilian life had been surprisingly smooth. Lisa, a nurse he'd met during his recovery from a shrapnel wound, had provided the stability he needed. Her gentle nature had been a balm to his war-torn psyche, and when Danny was born, Rob had believed he'd finally found peace. But something had shifted in recent months. Lisa's phone calls ended abruptly when he entered rooms. She volunteered for extra shifts at the hospital with increasing frequency. Small details that as trained I couldn't ignore. New perfume, clothes he hadn't seen her buy, a lightness in her step that hadn't been there in years. Rob had learned long ago that intuition kept you alive. His was screaming, "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" Danny's voice broke through his thoughts. Rob settled beside his son, noting how the boy instinctively straightened when he approached. The respect was there, but so was distance. Rob had tried to be softer with Danny than his own father had been with him, but some habits died hard. The boy needed to understand that strength mattered in this world. "What's the problem?" Rob asked, scanning the worksheet. As they worked through the algebra, Rob's phone buzzed. A text from his foreman. "Storm damage on the Morrison site. Need your call." "I have to step out for a bit," Rob announced, grabbing his keys. "Work emergency." Lisa looked up from the stove, her expression unreadable. "How long will you be?" "Couple hours, maybe less." He kissed her cheek, noticing how she tensed slightly at his touch. Another small sign in the growing collection. The Morrison job site was a 40-minute drive, but Rob handled the crisis in 20 minutes. A fallen tree had damaged some framing, nothing that couldn't wait until morning. He'd used work emergencies as cover before, old habits from his military days, when gathering intelligence meant being where people didn't expect you. As he drove home through the darkening streets of Millbrook Heights, Rob's mind worked through possibilities. If Lisa was having an affair, he needed proof. If it was something else, something worse, he needed to know that too. The one thing he wouldn't tolerate was betrayal. He'd made that clear to everyone in his life, including Lisa. The neighborhood was quiet as he pulled into his driveway. Most houses glowed with the warm light of family dinners and evening routines. The picture of suburban tranquility. But Rob had learned that surfaces often lied. He'd killed the headlights and sat for a moment, studying his house. Lisa's car was in the garage. Danny's light was on upstairs. Everything appeared normal. But as he walked toward the front door, he noticed his neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, watching from her window. She quickly ducked behind her curtains. Mrs. Vance was a widow in her 70s, the unofficial neighborhood watchdog. She knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. Her vigilance had always amused Rob, but tonight, her behavior seemed different. Nervous. Inside, the house felt too quiet. Lisa was loading the dishwasher, moving with the efficient motions of someone eager to finish a task. "Everything okay at the site?" she asked without looking up. "Fine. Just storm damage." Rob studied her profile. "You seem distracted. Just tired. Long shift." She closed the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "I'm going to bed early. I'll be up in a bit. Want to check on Danny first." Rob climbed the stairs, his footsteps silent on the carpeted steps, another habit from his past life. Danny's door was cracked open, soft music playing from his phone. The boy was already asleep, his face peaceful in the dim light. For a moment, Rob allowed himself to imagine that his suspicions were wrong, that his family was exactly what it appeared to be. But as he turned to head to his bedroom, he heard Lisa's voice drifting up from downstairs. She was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, familiar. The voice of a woman talking to a lover. Rob stood frozen at the top of the stairs, his jaw clenched. 15 years of marriage, and she was throwing it away for what? A moment of excitement? A midlife crisis? The conversation ended, and he heard Lisa moving around downstairs. By the time she came to bed, Rob was pretending to read, his face carefully neutral. "Good book?" she asked, settling under the covers. "Military history. Pretty dry stuff." He set the book aside and turned off the lamp. "Good night, Lisa." "Good night." In the darkness, Rob stared at the ceiling and began a plan. If Lisa wanted to play games, she'd pick the wrong opponent. He'd spent years learning how to hunt the most dangerous prey on earth. A cheating suburban wife would be child's play. But first, he needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. Tomorrow, he'd start gathering intelligence. And then, depending on what he found, he'd decide just how merciless his response would be. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The next morning unfolded with the deceptive normalcy that Rob was beginning to recognize as performance art. Lisa bustled around the kitchen, making coffee and packing Danny's lunch with the practiced efficiency of a devoted mother. But Rob noticed the tremor in her hands, the way she avoided his eyes. "I might be late tonight," she said, not looking up from Danny's sandwich. "Dr. Morrison wants me to cover the evening shift." Again, Rob kept his tone light, but made sure she heard the question underneath. "It's good money, and with Danny starting high school next year." She trailed off, finally meeting his eyes. "We could use the extra income." It was a reasonable explanation. It was also a lie. Rob had built a successful business. Money wasn't an issue, and Lisa knew it. But he simply nodded and kissed her cheek before heading to work. At the job site, Rob's mind wasn't on construction schedules or supply deliveries. He was thinking like a soldier again, analyzing patterns and weaknesses. Lisa's affair, because he was now certain that's what this was, had made her sloppy. People in love, even illicit love, always were. During lunch break, he made a call to an old Army buddy who now ran a private security firm in Hartford. Tony Riggs owed Rob his life from an incident in Kandahar that neither man talked about anymore. "I need a favor," Rob said without preamble when Tony answered. "What kind of favor?" "The quiet kind. Background check on someone. Real quiet." Tony was silent for a moment. "Personal?" "Yeah. Text me the details. I'll have something by tomorrow." Rob sent over what he knew: Lisa's full name, birth date, social security number, workplace. If she was involved with someone, Tony would find out who. The afternoon dragged by, but Rob forced himself to maintain his routine. He reviewed blueprints, spoke with subcontractors, handled the dozen small crises that arose on any construction site. But his mind kept circling back to Lisa, to the careful way she'd been arranging her deceptions. At 5:30, he drove home through the familiar streets of Millbrook Heights. The neighborhood was coming alive with the evening rituals of suburban life. Children playing in yards, fathers washing cars, mothers calling families to dinner. The American dream on full display. Mrs. Vance was in her garden when he pulled into his driveway, her attention seemingly focused on her roses. But Rob caught her watching him in his peripheral vision. He made a mental note to speak with her soon. In his experience, nosy neighbors often knew more than they realized. Inside, Danny was sprawled on the living room floor, textbooks scattered around him. The sight of his son studying triggered something protective in Rob's chest. Whatever Lisa was doing, Danny would be caught in the crossfire. The boy didn't deserve that. "Where's your mom?" Rob asked, settling into his recliner. "Hospital. Said she'd be late again." Danny didn't look up from his history book. "Mrs. Patterson is making dinner for us." Mrs. Patterson was their neighbor from 2 houses down, a kind woman who often helped out when Lisa worked late shifts. Or claimed to. Rob spent the evening helping Danny with homework and reviewing work emails, but part of his attention remained focused on the clock. At 8:30, his phone buzzed with a text from Lisa: "Busy night. Won't be home until after midnight. Don't wait up." He stared at the message, noting its brevity, the lack of any personal touch. This wasn't the woman who used to send him rambling texts about her day, who'd add heart emojis and inside jokes. This was someone checking in with an obligation. After putting Danny to bed, Rob sat in his darkened living room, nursing a beer and thinking. The house felt different without Lisa, more honest somehow. The careful performance was over, and he could finally drop his own act. His phone rang at 9:15. "Tony, that was fast," Rob said. "This one was easy. Your wife's been busy, brother." Rob felt his grip tighten on the phone. "Tell me." "She's been seeing someone for about 4 months. Guy named Trevor Mills, 36, works as a physical therapist at the same hospital. Divorced, no kids, clean record. But here's where it gets interesting." "I'm listening." "This isn't his first rodeo with married women. Guy's got a pattern. Targets wives with money, usually older. There was a situation in Boston 2 years ago, a woman named Jennifer Caldwell, married to a successful lawyer. She died in a car accident 6 months after she started seeing Mills." Rob's blood went cold. "Accident. That's what the report says. Single car crash, lost control on a rainy night. But the timing was convenient. The husband had just increased her life insurance policy. Mills disappeared from Boston right after the funeral. And I think your wife might be in over her head with the wrong guy. Or maybe she knows exactly what she's doing. Either way, you need to be careful. After Tony hung up, Rob sat in the silence of his house, processing what he'd learned. Lisa wasn't just having an affair. She was involved with someone who might be planning something far worse than adultery. He thought about Danny, asleep upstairs, innocent and trusting. About the life insurance policies Lisa had suggested they update last month. About her sudden interest in their financial accounts. Her questions about his business assets. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that made Rob's military instincts scream warnings. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a setup. At 11:40, he heard a car in the driveway. Rob quickly moved to the window, watching as a dark sedan dropped Lisa off at the end of their driveway. She walked quickly to the house, her heels clicking on the pavement, her movements those of someone trying not to be noticed. Rob was back in his chair, apparently asleep, when she crept inside. He listened to her move through the house, her footsteps careful and measured. She paused outside Danny's room, then continued to their bedroom. When she slipped into bed beside him, Rob could smell unfamiliar cologne on her clothes. The scent of another man, another life she was living in the shadows. "Rob," she whispered, "are you awake?" He didn't answer, keeping his breathing steady and deep. After a few minutes, Lisa relaxed beside him, apparently satisfied that he was asleep. But Rob lay awake for hours, his mind working through scenarios and possibilities. If Trevor Mills was as dangerous as Tony suggested, then Lisa might be as much a victim as a perpetrator. Or she might be a willing accomplice in whatever they were planning. Either way, Rob knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't wait around to find out which. Tomorrow, he'd begin his own operation. And unlike his targets, he had experience dealing with people who want him dead. By morning, Rob had made his decision. If they wanted to play the long game, he'd show them what a real predator looked like when it was cornered. Chapter 3. The Hunter Emerges. Rob woke before dawn, his internal clock still tuned to military precision. Lisa lay beside him, her face peaceful in sleep, looking like the woman he'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. But Rob had learned not to trust appearances. People were never who they seemed to be, especially when they had something to hide. He slipped out of bed and dressed quietly, his movements automatic and silent. Downstairs, he started the coffee maker and settled at his laptop. Time to do some hunting of his own. Trevor Mills had left a digital footprint, as most people did in the modern world. Social media profiles painted him as a charming, fitness-obsessed professional who specialized in sports therapy. His Instagram was full of selfies at the gym, pictures of expensive dinners, and motivational quotes about living life to the fullest. Classic narcissist behavior, in Rob's opinion. More interesting were the gaps in Mills' online presence. 6 months in Boston with no posts, followed by a sudden move to Connecticut. A pattern of targeting women in their late 30s and early 40s, always married, always financially comfortable. The man was a professional, Rob realized. A predator with a system. Lisa appeared in the kitchen at 7, already dressed for work in scrubs that seemed somehow more flattering than they used to be. She moved with purpose, avoiding his eyes as she poured coffee. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Storm kept me awake." There had been no storm, but Lisa didn't contradict him. Either she'd been too distracted to notice the weather, or she was too lost in her own lies to track his. "I might be late again tonight," she said, reaching for her purse. Dr. Morrison scheduled another evening procedure. Rob looked up from his laptop, studying her face. She met his eyes this time, her expression carefully neutral. She was getting better at lying, he noted. "Practice made perfect. That's the 3rd time this week," he said. "Maybe you should ask for a raise." "Maybe I will." She kissed his cheek, the gesture perfunctory. "Tell Danny I said goodbye." After she left, Rob sat in the quiet kitchen, thinking. Lisa's deception was becoming more elaborate, which meant whatever she and Mills were planning was accelerating. He needed to move faster. At 8:30, after Danny caught the school bus, Rob made another call to Tony. "I need more on Trevor Mills," he said. "Everything you can find." Financial records, employment history, known associates. And I need it today. This is getting serious, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Rob spent the morning at the job site, but his mind was elsewhere. He found himself studying the crew, noting which men had the skill set for surveillance work. Old habits from his Army days, when every mission required backup plans and contingencies. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Park. Bench by the duck pond. 1 hour. Come alone. Rob stared at the message, his instincts immediately on high alert. This wasn't from Tony. His contact would have called. Someone else knew about his investigation. He drove to Riverside Park, his senses heightened. The place was mostly empty on a Tuesday afternoon, just a few joggers and an elderly man feeding ducks. Rob spotted Mrs. Vance sitting on the specified bench, looking nervous and out of place. Mrs. Vance, he said, approaching slowly. I wasn't expecting to see you here. I know this is strange, Robert, she said, not meeting his eyes. But I had to talk to you. About Lisa. Rob settled beside her on the bench, maintaining the casual posture of a neighborly conversation while his mind raced. What about Lisa? I've been watching. I know that sounds terrible, but I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I noticed things. She twisted her hands in her lap. Lisa's been lying to you. Go on. She hasn't been working late at the hospital. Not every night, anyway. I've seen her car come home, then leave again after you're in bed. And yesterday morning, when you left for work early, a man came to your house. He was there for 2 hours. Rob felt his jaw clench. Can you describe it? Tall, dark hair, expensive clothes. Handsome, I suppose. He had a key, Robert. He let himself in like he belonged there. The confirmation of what Rob already suspected still hit him like a physical blow. But it was the detail about the key that made his blood run cold. Giving Mills access to their home meant this had moved beyond a simple affair. It was an invasion. Why are you telling me this? Rob asked. Mrs. Vance finally looked at him, her eyes frightened. Because I'm scared for you. And for Danny. Last night, when you and Lisa came home from your neighbor's emergency, I was watching from my window. I saw that man in your backyard. He ran when the police cars arrived. Rob's mind went blank for a moment. There had been no neighbor's emergency last night. No police cars. Mrs. Vance was confused, mixing up events, or then it hit him. She was talking about something that hadn't happened yet, something that was planned for the future. Mrs. Vance, he said carefully, what emergency are you talking about? Her face went pale. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I heard Lisa on the phone yesterday. She was talking about tonight, about how you and Danny would be coming home, and she stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. What did you hear exactly? She said, when Robert and Danny get home tonight, we'll be ready. The neighbor will pull them aside, and then we can finish this. I thought she was planning a surprise party or something, but then she said something about making it look like an accident. Rob's training kicked in, overriding the shock and rage that threatened to consume him. Lisa and Mills weren't just planning to betray him. They were planning to kill him. Tonight. Mrs. Vance, I need you to listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice calm and controlled. You need to go visit your sister in Albany. Today. Right now. Pack a bag and leave town for a few days. But Robert, this isn't a suggestion. These people are dangerous, and you've already seen too much. If you stay, you could get hurt. Mrs. Vance nodded, tears in her eyes. What about you and Danny? Rob stood, his mind already working through the tactical situation. Don't worry about us. But Mrs. Vance? If anyone asks, you never spoke to me today. As he drove back home, Rob's phone rang. Tony, I've got more on your boy Mills, Tony said. And brother, you're not going to like it. Tell me, Jennifer Caldwell in Boston? Her death wasn't the first. There was another woman in Phoenix and one in Miami before that. All married, all wealthy, all dead within 6 months of getting involved with Mills. The man's a serial killer, Rob. He targets married women, seduces them, gets them to change their wills or insurance policies, then kills them and their families. Rob felt something cold and predatory awaken in his chest. Any arrests? Never enough evidence. Guy's careful, and he has help. There's a woman who works with him, different name each time, but the same MO. She gets close to the targets, gains their trust, helps set up the kills. A woman. Rob thought about Lisa's behavior over the past few months, her sudden interest in their finances, her questions about his business insurance. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been someone else entirely? Tony, Rob said, I need you to make some calls. People who might be interested in dealing with a problem like this. Quietly, Rob, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking my wife and her boyfriend are planning to murder me and my son tonight. And I'm thinking that's a mistake they're going to regret. Rob ended the call and drove toward his house, his mind clear and focused for the first time in months. The game had changed. Lisa and Mills thought they were hunting a suburban contractor, an easy mark who'd build a comfortable life and gone soft. They had no idea they'd targeted a man who'd spent years learning how to kill without remorse, how to plan operations that left no evidence, how to eliminate threats with surgical precision. Tonight, they'd learn the difference between predator and prey. And Rob would teach them the most important lesson of all. Never underestimate a soldier who's protecting his family. The war was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Soldier's Mind. Rob arrived home to find the house exactly as he'd left it, on the surface. But now he moved through the familiar spaces with a different perspective, seeing them through the eyes of someone planning an attack. He noted sight lines, entry points, potential weapons, escape routes. The comfortable suburban home transformed into a battlefield in his mind. In his study, he opened a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside were items from his previous life, tactical gear, communication equipment, and a Glock 19 he'd kept despite Lisa's objections. His hands moved with muscle memory as he checked the weapon, loaded it, and secured it in a concealed holster. From another compartment, he retrieved a military-grade tactical knife and a small surveillance device, technology that had saved his life more than once in Afghanistan. Old habits died hard, and Rob had never quite trusted the peace of civilian life enough to completely disarm himself. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa, working late again. Kissed any good night for me. Rob stared at the message, feeling the last vestiges of the man who'd loved her die quietly in his chest. She was already positioning herself away from the scene, establishing her alibi while her partner prepared for murder. Danny came home from school at 3:15, dumping his backpack by the door with teenage carelessness. For a moment, Rob watched his son and felt something that might have been grief. After tonight, their lives would never be the same. Dad, you okay? Danny was looking at him with concern. You look weird. Just thinking about work stuff, Rob said. How was school? Boring. Can I go to Tyler's house? His mom said I could stay for dinner. Perfect. Rob needed Danny away from the house, but sending him away too obviously might alert Lisa to a change in routine. Tyler's mom called me. No, but call her. If she's okay with it, you can go. But I want you to spend the night there too. School project or something. Danny's face brightened. Really? Sweet. Tyler's got the new Call of Duty game. Just call his mom first. While Danny made the call, Rob's mind worked through the evening's probabilities. If Mrs. Vance had overheard correctly, the plan involved him and Danny returning home to some kind of staged emergency. A neighbor would intercept them, providing an alibi witness, while Lisa and Mills were inside waiting. The setup suggested they planned to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong, or possibly a murder-suicide. Rob had seen enough crime scenes to know how these things were typically staged. Danny bounded back into the room. Mrs. Chun says it's fine. She's making spaghetti. Good. Pack an overnight bag. I'll drive you over. As Danny ran upstairs, Rob's phone rang. A number he didn't recognize. Yeah. Mr. Hartwell? This is Detective Morrison from the State Police. I understand you might have some information about a case we're working on. Rob went cold. No one should know about his investigation, except Tony. Who told you that? A concerned citizen called in a tip. Says they have reason to believe your wife might be in danger. Something about a man named Trevor Mills. The call was a setup. Either Mills had somehow learned about Rob's investigation and was trying to smoke him out, or Lisa was creating a paper trail that would support whatever story they planned to tell after tonight. I think you have the wrong number, Rob said. I don't know anyone named Trevor Mills. Sir, if your wife is involved with this man, she could be in serious danger. Mills is wanted for questioning in connection with several suspicious deaths. We need to bring her in for her own protection. Like I said, wrong number. Rob hung up and immediately called Tony. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? Someone just called claiming to be state police, warning me about Mills. Used your exact words from this morning. Tony swore. Someone's got ears on this conversation. My secure line might be compromised. Or yours isn't the only investigation into Mills. Rob thought quickly. Either way, they know I know. That changes tonight's timeline. Rob, you need to get out of there. Take your boy and disappear for a while. No. Rob's voice was flat, final. I'm done running from problems. These people want to play games with my family? I'll show them what a real game looks like. After hanging up, Rob drove Danny to the Chun house, his mind calculating odds and variables. The fake police call meant his enemies were either very smart or very desperate. Possibly both. Dad, Danny said as they pulled into the Chen's driveway. Everything's okay, right? You've been acting strange lately. Rob looked at his son, really looked at him. Danny had his mother's eyes, but Rob's stubborn jaw. A good kid who deserved better than to grow up with a mother who'd try to have him killed. Everything's going to be fine, Rob said. I just need you to promise me something. If anything weird happens, if anyone you don't know comes looking for you, or if Mrs. Chun gets scared about anything, you call me immediately. And if you can't reach me, you call Uncle Tony. He handed Danny a business card with Tony's number. You're scaring me, Dad. Good. Smart people get scared sometimes. It keeps them alive. Back home, Rob began his preparations in earnest. He swept the house for surveillance devices and found two, a listening device in the bedroom and a small camera in the kitchen. Both were professional grade, which meant Mills had more resources than Tony's initial investigation had revealed. Rob left the devices in place, but disabled them in ways that would look like technical malfunctions. Let them think their surveillance had simply failed rather than been discovered. In his garage, he gathered materials from his construction supplies. Wire, timers, small explosive charges used for controlled demolitions. In the right hands, construction materials could become very dangerous things. As the sun set, Rob positioned himself in his darkened living room with a clear view of the street. The tactical vest felt familiar under his shirt, like putting on an old uniform. His weapons were within easy reach, and his mind had settled into the calm, predatory focus that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. At 8:30, Mrs. Vance's house went dark. She followed his advice and left town, which was one less variable to worry about. At 9:15, a dark sedan cruised slowly past his house, the same car that had dropped Lisa off the night before. Rob's phone buzzed. Heading home now. Danny asleep? He typed back, at Tyler's for the night. See you soon. The trap was set. Now, he just had to wait for the predators to walk into it. But Rob had learned something important during his years as a soldier. The best defense was always a vicious, overwhelming offense. Tonight, Lisa and Mills would discover that they'd made a fatal error in judgment. They'd tried to hunt a man who'd spent years perfecting the art of war. And in war, mercy was a luxury that got you killed. Chapter 5, The Web Titans. At 9:45, Rob's motion sensors picked up movement in his backyard. He'd installed the system years ago as a security measure, but tonight it served a different purpose. Through his night vision scope, he watched a figure moving carefully along the tree line behind his house. Trevor Mills was exactly what Rob had expected. Tall, athletic, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He carried a small duffel bag and wore dark clothing that would blend into shadows. Professional equipment for a professional killer. Rob's phone buzzed with another text from Lisa, 5 minutes out. Make sure the garage door is open. Interesting. She wanted him to meet her in the garage, away from windows where neighbors might see. That suggested the plan required witnesses to believe Rob had been home when the attack occurred. Rob moved through his house with silent precision, checking his preparations one final time. The explosive charges were in place, wired to remote detonators he could trigger from his phone. Not enough to level the house, but sufficient to create chaos and eliminate evidence. In the kitchen, he left a half-finished beer on the counter and turned on the television, signs of normal evening activity. Then he slipped out through his basement exit, a door hidden behind landscaping that Lisa had never known existed. The backyard was dark, but Rob moved through it like he owned it. Because he did. Every tree, every shadow, every sight line had been mapped in his mind. This was his terrain, and Mills was operating blind. Rob positioned himself behind the garden shed with a clear view of both the house and the woods where Mills was hiding. His phone showed Lisa's car turning onto their street. Through his scope, Rob watched Mills check his watch and begin moving toward the house. The man's timing was precise, coordinated with Lisa's arrival. They'd planned this carefully, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed their target would be passive. Lisa's car pulled into the driveway. Rob watched her sit behind the wheel for a moment, her phone glowing as she typed a message, probably confirming to Mills that she was in position. Then she stepped out of the car, and Rob felt a cold shock run through him. Lisa was wearing scrubs, but underneath he could see a bulletproof vest. She was armed and armored, prepared for a fight. This wasn't a seduction gone wrong or a crime of passion. This was a military-style operation. His wife had become someone he'd never known existed. Lisa moved toward the house, her movements careful and controlled. She had training, Rob realized. Probably not military, but enough to be dangerous. The question was, had she always been this person, or had Mills transformed her into something else? Through his phone, Rob triggered the listening device in the bedroom, turning it back on. If they were going to coordinate their attack, he wanted to hear their plan. Mills reached the back door as Lisa entered through the garage. Rob listened through his earpiece as they moved through his house like they owned it. "He's not here," Mills said, his voice carrying the flat accent of the American Midwest. "His car's in the driveway," Lisa replied. "He has to be here." "Well, find him. We're on a schedule." Rob smiled grimly. They were looking for a victim who was supposed to be watching television and drinking beer. Instead, they'd walked into the web of someone who'd spent years hunting the most dangerous prey on Earth. "Maybe he's in the shower," Lisa suggested. "Check upstairs. I'll take the basement." They were splitting up, which was tactically sound but played into Rob's hands. Divide and conquer worked both ways. Rob triggered the first phase of his plan. The lights in the house went out as he cut power to the main electrical panel. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows through the windows. "What the hell?" Mills' voice crackled through the earpiece. "Power must have gone out," Lisa said, but Rob could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "There's a backup generator in the garage." "Forget the generator. We do this in the dark." Rob moved closer to the house, using the shadows to mask his approach. Through the kitchen window, he could see Mills moving through the downstairs rooms, a flashlight in one hand and a pistol in the other. The man was skilled, checking corners and maintaining tactical awareness. But he was also in Rob's house, where every creak and shadow was familiar territory. Rob triggered the second phase. The motion-activated sprinkler system came online, flooding the backyard with water and creating a muddy, slippery terrain that would slow any escape attempt. It also covered the sound of his movement as he approached the back door. Inside, he could hear Lisa calling softly, "Robert, are you okay? The power's out." The performance was almost convincing. If Rob hadn't known better, he might have believed his worried wife was searching for him in the dark. But he'd heard her real voice talking to Mills, seen her bulletproof vest, watched her move like someone who knew how to kill. His phone vibrated with a motion alert from his front yard cameras. A van had pulled up across the street, and two more figures were moving toward his house. This wasn't just Lisa and Mills. They had a team. Rob's mind shifted into combat mode. 4 attackers, professional equipment, coordinated timing. They'd planned this as a precision operation, probably intending to stage it as a home invasion that went tragically wrong. But they'd made their first mistake by bringing a knife to a gunfight. And their second mistake was thinking they were hunting a suburban contractor instead of a soldier who'd made killing his profession. Through his earpiece, Rob heard Mills moving toward the basement stairs. Time to even the odds. He entered his house through the back door, moving with the silent precision that had kept him alive in hostile territory. The familiar layout guided him through the darkness as he positioned himself at the top of the basement stairs. Below, Mill's flashlight beam swept across the basement workshop where Rob kept his tools. The man was being thorough, checking every hiding place. Professional behavior. Rob waited until Mills was at the far end of the basement, then triggered the third phase of his plan. The basement door slammed shut and locked automatically, trapping Mills below. At the same time, Rob released a small canister of tear gas down the stairs. Mills' shouts of alarm echoed through the house as the gas took effect. Rob smiled grimly. 1 down, 3 to go. Trevor. Lisa's voice was sharp with panic. Trevor, what's happening? Rob's phone showed the other 2 attackers reaching his front door. Time to introduce himself properly. In the darkness of his own home, Robert Hartwell stopped being a suburban contractor and became Staff Sergeant Hartwell again. And Staff Sergeant Hartwell had never lost a battle. Chapter 6. The Hunt Begins. Rob moved through his darkened house like a ghost, every footstep calculated and silent. Lisa was on the 2nd floor, her flashlight beam visible through the stair railing as she searched the bedrooms. The 2 newcomers were at his front door, their lockpicking tools working methodically through his security system. From the basement came the sound of Mills coughing and cursing as the tear gas did its work. The man was trapped, but not eliminated, a problem Rob would address shortly. But first, he needed to deal with the immediate threat. Through his front window cameras, Rob studied the 2 new arrivals. Both men, both armed, both moving with the professional coordination of people who'd done this before. One was older, maybe 50, with the thick build of an ex-cop or military. The other was younger, lean and quick, probably the team's specialist for breaking and entering. Rob's phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. He answered it, knowing exactly who it would be. Mr. Hartwell. The older man's voice came through clearly. My name is Detective Morrison. We spoke earlier today. Still not a real detective, Rob said softly. You're right. But I am the man who's going to kill you and your family tonight unless you cooperate. Rob watched through his camera as the fake detective gestured to his partner, who produced a small explosive device. They were preparing to breach his front door. What do you want? Rob asked, playing for time while he positioned himself. I want you to come outside, hands visible, and walk slowly to the van across the street. Do that, and your son lives. My son isn't here. Tyler Chen's house. 47 Maple Street. My associates are already in position. Rob felt ice form in his veins. They had Danny's location, which meant they'd been watching for longer than he'd realized. This wasn't just about killing him and Lisa. They were eliminating potential witnesses. I need proof my son is safe, Rob said. You'll get proof when you surrender. You have 60 seconds. The line went dead. Rob immediately called Tony while moving toward his weapons cache. They've got Danny's location, he said when Tony answered. I'm 10 minutes out from the Chen house, Tony replied. My team's already moving. Make it 5 minutes. Rob, what about you? I'm about to have a very loud conversation with some people who think they're running this operation. Rob ended the call and triggered the 4th phase of his plan. Every window in his house suddenly blazed with light as hidden floodlights activated, turning his home into a beacon visible for blocks. The sudden illumination would alert every neighbor within a quarter mile that something was wrong. Then he triggered the 5th phase. The small explosive charges he'd placed throughout the house began detonating in sequence. Not enough to cause structural damage, but sufficient to create the sound of a massive firefight. Smoke grenades activated simultaneously, filling the first floor with thick, choking clouds. To anyone outside, it would sound like a war zone. The fake detective and his partner immediately aborted their breach attempt, falling back toward their van as sirens began wailing in the distance. Rob's noise had triggered every security alarm within 6 blocks, and Millbrook Heights Private Security Company was already responding. But Rob wasn't finished. Through his basement intercom, he spoke to Mills. Trevor? Can you hear me down there? Mills' coughing reply was barely intelligible. Good. I want you to listen very carefully. My name is Staff Sergeant Robert Hartwell, 75th Ranger Regiment. 3 tours in Afghanistan, specializing in counterinsurgency operations. That means I've spent the last 15 years learning how to hunt people like you. Rob moved toward the basement door, gas mask in place, his weapon ready. You made a mistake tonight, Trevor. You brought a few thugs and some basic surveillance equipment to hunt a man who's forgotten more about killing than you'll ever learn. He opened the basement door and descended into the smoke-filled darkness, his night vision goggles turning the basement into a green-tinted battlefield. Mills was on the floor near the far wall, his weapon dropped, his hands clawing at his eyes. The tear gas will clear in about 10 minutes, Rob said conversationally, zip-tying Mills' hands behind his back. But you won't be conscious for it. Mills tried to speak, but Rob's tactical baton to the base of his skull ended the conversation. The man dropped unconscious but breathing. 1 down, 3 to go. Rob's phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Package secured. Your boy is safe. Relief flooded through Rob, followed immediately by cold, calculated rage. They'd threatened Danny. They'd brought his son into this war, and that was an unforgivable escalation. Upstairs, Lisa was calling his name, her voice sharp with panic. The sounds of explosions and the sudden arrival of sirens had clearly not been part of their plan. Robert, what's happening? Are you hurt? Even now, she was maintaining her performance. The concerned wife, terrified for her husband's safety. If Rob hadn't known better, he might have believed her. He climbed the stairs, leaving Mills unconscious in the basement. The first floor was filled with smoke, but Rob moved through it easily, his equipment making him nearly invisible. Lisa, he called back. I'm here. Are you okay? I'm in our bedroom. Something's wrong with the house. I think there's been an explosion. Rob made his way upstairs, noting that Lisa's voice was coming from their walk-in closet. Smart positioning, good cover, multiple exit routes, and close to the bathroom window that offered an escape route to the roof. She was learning, or perhaps she'd always known more than she'd let on. I'm coming, Rob said, approaching the bedroom door. Just stay where you are. Through the doorway, he could see the glow of Lisa's flashlight in the closet. She was positioned behind their dresser, using it as cover. Her pistol was visible in her right hand. Rob smiled grimly. The mask was finally coming off. Lisa, he said softly, we need to talk. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. Rob stood in the doorway of his bedroom, studying the woman who had shared his bed for 15 years. Lisa crouched behind their dresser, her pistol trained on the doorway, her face a mask of concentration that he'd never seen before. This wasn't the gentle nurse he'd married. This was someone else entirely. Come out slowly, Robert, she said, her voice steady and cold. Hands where I can see them. You know, Lisa, in all our years together, you never mentioned you knew how to handle a gun. There are a lot of things you don't know about me. Rob stepped into the room, his hands visible but ready. Through his night vision, he could see that Lisa was wearing more than just the bulletproof vest. She had tactical gear hidden under her scrubs, including what looked like a communication device. Like the fact that you've been planning to kill me for months. Lisa's grip on the pistol tightened. Where's Trevor? Taking a nap in the basement. Don't worry, he's still breathing. For now. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, Robert. Actually, I think I do. Trevor Mills, serial killer with a specialty in married women. 3 confirmed victims, probably more. You helped him target me, just like you helped him with the others. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Lisa's eyes. How do you know about Jennifer Caldwell? About Phoenix and Miami? Because I spent 15 years learning how to gather intelligence, Lisa. It's what I do. Sirens were getting closer, and Rob could hear vehicles arriving outside. But the sounds weren't from police. They were from Millbrook Heights Security, whose response protocols Rob had helped design when he'd moved to the neighborhood. Those aren't cops, Rob said conversationally. It's private security. They'll contain the area and wait for real police, which gives us about 20 minutes to finish our conversation. Robert, listen to me. You don't understand the situation. I understand that you've been lying to me for months. I understand that you gave your boyfriend a key to our house. I understand that you were planning to kill me and Danny tonight and make it look like a home invasion. Lisa's face went pale. Danny? We never. Your friends had his location. They threatened him to make me surrender. That wasn't part of the plan. Lisa's composure cracked, revealing something that might have been genuine distress. Trevor promised me Danny would be safe. And you believed him? A man who's killed at least 4 people, including children? There were no children in Boston, or... Jennifer Caldwell had an 8-year-old daughter, Lisa. She died in the same car crash. Did Trevor forget to mention that detail? The color drained from Lisa's face completely. For a moment, the weapon in her hands wavered. That's impossible. He told me she was alone. He said we would never hurt children. He lied. Just like he lied when he told you this would be quick and clean. Just like he lied when he said he loved you. Rob could see the moment when Lisa's entire worldview began to collapse. The woman who'd spent months planning his murder was realizing she'd been as much a victim as a perpetrator. Lisa, Rob said softly, how long have you known him? 8 months, she whispered. He came to the hospital after a climbing accident. I was his physical therapist. Before that, did you ever think about killing anyone? Did you ever imagine yourself planning a murder? No, never. I'm a nurse. I save people. Then what happened? What changed? Lisa's hands were shaking now, the gun no longer steady. He said you were planning to leave me, that you'd hired a lawyer, that you were going to take Danny and disappear. He showed me documents, emails, all fake. He said if we didn't act first, I'd lose everything. Danny would grow up hating me. I'd be alone and broke, and he offered you a solution. At first it was just surveillance. He wanted to know your schedule, your routines. Then he started talking about how easy it would be to stage an accident, how we could be together and Danny would inherit everything. Rob stepped closer, his voice gentle despite the situation. Lisa, look at me. Really look at me. In 15 years of marriage, have I ever given you reason to think I'd abandon my family? The weapon dropped to her side as tears began streaming down her face. No, God, no. You're the most loyal person I've ever known. That's why I fell in love with you. Then why did you believe him? Because I wanted to. Because being with him made me feel alive again, and I didn't want to lose that feeling. Rob felt something twist in his chest. Not forgiveness. That was beyond his capacity now, but understanding. Lisa hadn't been evil. She'd been weak, manipulated by someone who understood how to exploit weakness. But weakness that threatened his family was still unforgivable. Where are the others? Rob asked. The 2 men who were at our front door? I don't know. Trevor handles the operational details. I was just supposed to get you into the garage and then what? You pull the trigger yourself. Lisa's face crumpled. I don't know. I don't think I could have. Even after everything, I don't think I could have actually. But you were willing to let Trevor do it. Yes. The simple honesty of her answer cut deeper than any elaborate justification would have. Lisa had been prepared to watch him die, even if she couldn't pull the trigger herself. Danny's safe, Rob said. My people got to him before yours did. Your people. I told you, Lisa. You never really knew who you married. Rob's phone buzzed with a message from Tony. Perimeter secured. 2 suspects in custody. Local PD en route. Time was running out. In a few minutes, this would become a police matter with lawyers and procedures and legal complications that would tie up the truth for months. Rob had a choice to make. He could let the system handle Lisa and Mills, trust that justice would eventually prevail. Or he could finish this the way he'd been trained to finish things in Afghanistan. He looked at the woman who'd shared his bed, who'd mothered his son, who'd been prepared to watch him die for the promise of a new life with a serial killer. Lisa, he said, I need you to understand something. After tonight, we're done. Not just our marriage, everything. You'll never see Danny again. You'll never contact him, never try to explain yourself to him, never interfere in his life. Robert, please. I'm not finished. You have 2 choices. You can cooperate fully with the police, testify against Mills and his associates, and accept whatever prison sentence they give you. Or you can disappear tonight and never come back to Connecticut. What do you mean, disappear? Rob's smile was cold and empty. I mean, you have about 10 minutes before the police arrive to decide whether you want to face justice or face me. Because if you choose to fight this, if you try to claim you were coerced or manipulated or not responsible for your actions, I will use every skill I learned in 15 years of military service to hunt you down and finish what you started tonight. Lisa stared at him, seeing for the first time the man she'd actually married. The soldier who'd spent years perfecting the art of war, who'd learned that mercy was a luxury that got people killed. You're scaring me, she whispered. Good. You should be scared. You tried to kill my family, Lisa. In my world, that has consequences. Outside, Rob could hear vehicles arriving, real police this time, not private security. Time to make a choice. So what's it going to be? He asked. Prison or running for the rest of your life? Lisa looked at the gun in her hands, then at the man who'd once promised to love her forever. Her choice would determine how this story ended and whether she lived to see tomorrow. Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Lisa stared at the weapon in her hands, then slowly placed it on the dresser. The gesture was surrender, but Rob remained ready. 15 years of marriage had taught him that Lisa could be unpredictable when cornered. I choose prison, she said quietly. I choose to testify against Trevor. Smart choice. Will you tell Danny the truth about what I did? Rob considered the question. Danny was 13, old enough to understand betrayal, but young enough to be destroyed by it. Learning that his mother had tried to murder his father would wound the boy in ways that might never heal. I'll tell him you made mistakes and had to go away. The details can wait until he's older. Relief flickered in Lisa's eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This isn't mercy, Lisa. This is tactics. Danny needs stability right now, not trauma. But when he's 18, when he can handle the truth, he'll learn exactly what kind of person his mother really is. The sound from outside were getting closer. Rob could hear tactical teams setting up a perimeter, the professional efficiency of law enforcement taking control of a crime scene. His phone buzzed with a call from Tony. Rob, you need to know, Mills had backup we didn't account for. There's a sniper team positioned 2 blocks south of your house. Rob's blood went cold. How many? 2 that we can see. Professional setup, military-grade equipment. They've been watching this whole time. Watching for what? Unknown. But they're not moving to engage. It's like they're waiting for something. Rob's mind raced through possibilities. If Mills had backup, why weren't they moving to extract him? Why position snipers to watch rather than act? Unless, Lisa, Rob said slowly, was Trevor working alone? What do you mean? I mean, did he have partners? People who hired him or coordinated with him? Lisa's face went pale. He mentioned someone once, called him the client, said this job was different because the client had specific requirements. What kind of requirements? I don't know. Trevor didn't tell me everything, but he said the client wanted to make sure there were no loose ends. Rob felt ice form in his veins. No loose ends meant eliminating witnesses. All witnesses. Lisa, I need you to think very carefully. Did Trevor ever mention anything about after? About what would happen to you once this was finished? He said we'd disappear together. Start over somewhere tropical. And you believed him? Why wouldn't I? We were partners in this. Rob closed his eyes briefly. Lisa truly had no idea how disposable she was to people like Mills. She'd been a useful tool, nothing more. Lisa, Trevor was going to kill you too. Tonight, after you'd served your purpose. That's impossible. He loved me. He loved what you could do for him. Once you'd help him kill me, you became a liability. Someone who could identify him, testify against him. You think a man who's killed at least 4 families would hesitate to eliminate one more witness? The truth hit Lisa like a physical blow. She staggered, reaching for the wall to steady herself. The bulletproof vest? Rob continued. Did Trevor tell you to wear it? He said it was for protection, in case you fought back, or in case he needed to shoot you and make it look like you died in the struggle with me. Outside, Rob could hear police setting up their command post. Bullhorns would be next, then negotiations. Standard procedure for a domestic disturbance with shots fired. But the sniper team changed everything. This wasn't over. Rob's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Hartwell, a cultured voice said, My name is Arthur Blackwood. I believe you have something that belongs to me. And what would that be? Information. Evidence. Witnesses. Mr. Mills was careless in his record keeping, and I need to ensure that certain documents don't find their way into the wrong hands. Rob put the call on speaker so Lisa could hear. Let her understand exactly how expendable she'd been. What kind of documents? Financial records, client lists, details about previous operations, the sort of information that could prove embarrassing to certain individuals. And if I refused to cooperate, Then my associates will ensure that you, your son, and anyone else who might have access to such information suffer unfortunate accidents, starting with the police officers currently surrounding your house. Through his window, Rob could see the tactical teams positioning themselves. Good men and women doing their jobs, unaware that they were in a sniper's crosshairs. "What do you want?" Rob asked. "Simple. You and Mrs. Hartwell will come out together. You'll tell the police that this was all a misunderstanding, a domestic dispute that got out of hand. Mr. Mills will unfortunately resist arrest and be killed in the process. Very tragic, but these things happen. And then you'll retrieve whatever evidence Mr. Mills may have hidden in your house and turn it over to my people. In exchange, your family lives, and this entire incident disappears from official records." Lisa was staring at the phone, finally understanding that she'd been a pawn in a much larger game. "You have 30 seconds to decide," Blackwood continued. "After that, I begin eliminating police officers until you comply." Rob looked at Lisa, seeing his own realization reflected in her eyes. They weren't just dealing with a serial killer anymore. Mills had been working for someone with serious resources, someone who could make entire incidents disappear from official records. Someone who had snipers positioned to kill cops if necessary. 20 seconds, Mr. Hartwell. Rob made his decision. "Lisa, when I tell you to move, you're going to run to the bathroom and lock the door. Don't come out until I call your name." "Robert, what are you?" 10 seconds. Rob triggered the final phase of his plan. Every remaining explosive charge in the house detonated simultaneously, not in sequence this time, but all at once. The controlled demolition charges he'd placed in the foundation support beams turned his home into a collapsing death trap. But they also created the perfect cover for what came next. As his house began to fall apart around them, Rob grabbed Lisa and threw them both toward the bathroom, the most structurally sound room in the house. Behind them, the bedroom ceiling caved in, crushing the space where they'd been standing. In the chaos of the collapse, with dust and debris filling the air, Rob activated his final contingency, the one he'd hoped never to use. His phone auto-dialed a number he'd memorized but never called. When it connected, he spoke a code phrase he'd hoped never to say. "Broken Arrow. This is Staff Sergeant Hartwell. I need immediate extraction and full tactical support." "Confirmed, Sergeant. Birds are inbound. ETA 4 minutes." Lisa stared at him through the dust and debris. "What did you just do?" "I called in the cavalry," Rob said grimly. And now Mr. Blackwood is about to learn the difference between threatening a suburban contractor and threatening a United States soldier. Outside, the sound of approaching helicopters began to cut through the night air. Rob's war was about to become everyone's problem. Chapter 9. The Final Stand. The helicopters arrived like mechanical thunder, their rotors beating the air above the ruins of Rob's house. Through the settling dust and debris, floodlights cut through the darkness as fast rope teams descended into his backyard with military precision. Rob recognized the uniforms and equipment immediately. Special Operations Command, probably drawn from his old unit. The cavalry had arrived, and they were ready for war. "Lisa," Rob said, helping her to her feet in the bathroom that had become their shelter, "whatever happens next, stay behind me and do exactly what I tell you." She nodded, too shocked to speak. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and her nurse's scrubs were torn and dusty, but she was alive. Rob's phone buzzed with an encrypted call. "Hartwell, this is Colonel Morrison. What's your status?" "2 civilians in protective custody, 1 hostile in the basement. Unknown number of additional hostiles with sniper support. Primary threat is Arthur Blackwood, civilian contractor with military resources." "Copy that. We've got thermal imaging on 2 sniper positions, both neutralized. Hostiles in black SUVs attempting to flee the area, being intercepted now." Through the bathroom window, Rob could see muzzle flashes in the distance as special ops teams engaged the fleeing vehicles. This had escalated from a domestic situation to a full military operation in minutes. "Sergeant," the colonel continued, "we need you to extract with any evidence related to this Blackwood individual. Command wants a full debrief on his operation." "Roger that." Be advised, one of the civilians is a cooperative witness with information about the hostile network. Rob looked at Lisa, who was staring at him with something approaching awe. The mild-mannered contractor she'd married had just summoned a military strike force with a phone call. "Robert," she whispered, "who are you really? Someone you should have asked that question about 15 years ago." A special ops soldier appeared at the bathroom window, his night vision goggles and tactical gear, making him look like something from a science fiction movie. "Sergeant Hartwell, I'm Master Sergeant Rodriguez. We're here to extract you. 2 civilians, plus whatever intel Mills was carrying." "Copy that. We've already secured the basement hostile. He's unconscious but stable." Rodriguez helped them through the window and out of the collapsed house. In the backyard, Rob saw a scene from his military past. Tactical teams securing the perimeter, communications specialists coordinating with air support, and medical personnel setting up a field station. "Danny," the thought hit Rob like a physical blow. "Rodriguez, I need immediate status on my son. He was at 47 Maple Street under protective custody. Already secured. Sergeant, your boy is safe and asking for you." Relief flooded through Rob, followed immediately by cold determination. Blackwood had threatened Danny. That was an unforgivable escalation that would have permanent consequences. "Where is Arthur Blackwood now?" Rob asked. "Unknown, but we recovered communications equipment from the sniper teams. NSA is backtracking his network as we speak." A Black Hawk helicopter touched down in Rob's backyard, its rotors churning up debris from his destroyed house. Lisa stared at the military hardware surrounding them, finally understanding that her husband's construction business had been only one part of his life. "Lisa," Rob said as medics checked her for injuries, "you're going to be debriefed by people who make Mills look like an amateur. Tell them everything you know about Blackwood's operation. Every detail, no matter how small. What about us? What about our family?" Rob looked at the woman who'd tried to have him killed, who'd been willing to watch him die for the promise of a new life with a serial killer. The woman who'd put their son in danger through her selfishness and stupidity. "There is no us, Lisa. There is no family. After tonight, you're a witness in a federal investigation, nothing more. But Danny will be told that his mother made some bad choices and had to go away. When he's older, when he can handle the truth, he'll learn what kind of person you really are. Until then, he's my responsibility." Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached with a tablet, displaying tactical information. "Sergeant, we've got Blackwood's location. Compound in the Berkshire Mountains, about 2 hours north. Command wants to know if you're available for consultation on the takedown." Rob looked at his destroyed house, at his son's bedroom window that was now just twisted metal and broken glass, at the woman who'd shared his bed and planned his murder. "Lisa," he said, "you have 2 choices. You can cooperate fully with the federal investigation, testify against Mills and anyone else in Blackwood's network, and accept witness protection when it's over. Or you can try to fight this, claim you were coerced, and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Arthur Blackwood isn't the only one with resources. The difference is mine come with official government backing. If you cooperate, you get a new identity and a fresh start somewhere far from here. If you don't," Rob didn't finish the threat. He didn't need to. Lisa had seen enough tonight to understand exactly what kind of man she'd betrayed. "I'll cooperate," she said quietly. "I'll tell them everything." "Good. Rodriguez, get her to the debrief team. Full protection protocols." As Lisa was led away by federal agents, she turned back once. "Robert, I'm sorry. For all of it." Rob watched her disappear into the back of an armored vehicle, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't bring back the 15 years she'd stolen from him with her lies. Sorry wouldn't erase the fact that she'd been prepared to watch him die. "Sergeant," Rodriguez was waiting for his answer about the Blackwood operation. Rob thought about Danny, safe now but traumatized by the night's events. About the life they'd have to build together, father and son, after the wreckage of everything they'd thought was real. About Arthur Blackwood, who'd threatened his family and was still out there, planning his next move. "Tell command I'm available," Rob said. "And tell them I want to be the one who puts Blackwood down." Copy that. What about your son? He goes to my brother's house in Colorado until this is finished. Full protection detail. And after it's finished? Rob looked at the ruins of his suburban dream, at the life he'd built and lost in a single night, at the future that stretched ahead of them, uncertain but finally honest. After it's finished, Danny and I start over. Somewhere new, with no lies between us. The Blackhawks' engine spooled up, ready to take him back to the war he'd thought he'd left behind. But this time, it wasn't about politics or territory or ideology. This time was personal. Rob Hartwell had spent 15 years pretending to be someone else, playing the role of suburban contractor and family man. But tonight had stripped away all pretense, revealing the soldier underneath. And soldiers, Rob knew, never left battles unfinished. As the helicopter lifted off into the dark Connecticut sky, carrying him toward his final confrontation with Arthur Blackwood, Rob felt something he hadn't experienced in years: the cold, pure satisfaction of purpose. He was going back to war, and this time he was going to finish it. 3 months later, Danny Hartwell sat in his new bedroom in Colorado, reading a letter from his father. The handwriting was familiar, but the man who'd written it was someone Danny was still learning to know. Son, the letter read, I know this has been hard. I know you have questions about your mother, about me, about why everything changed.